Welcome to Feeling Asian, a podcast where two Asians talk about their feelings. I'm Youngmi Mayer.
And I'm Brian Park.
We have such an amazing guest today. I'm so excited. I've been excited for days because we spoke to this person earlier and had a little pre-interview. And ever since, I've just been dying to record this episode, Brian. Been dying.
Oh, wow. No, but listeners, we're always excited for our guests, but you're in for a treat this week. And just a reminder, we've changed up our Patreon structure, and our shout outs will now be at the end of the episode. And we've shaken things up in our Patreon episode. So if you want to see what we've changed, or if you want to support the podcast, you can do so at Patreon at patreon.com/feelingasian. And I think we should just jump right into it, Youngmi. I'm ready to introduce our guest.
I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss of how to introduce our guest because I just want to say.
I wrote it down.
But I just want to say, like, legendary, the most important Asian American. No offense to other Asian Americans, but I feel like legend. Right, legend. What did you write down, Brian? I feel like yours will sound more professional. I'm just like standing.
Okay. So Youngmi said legend. I have written down here, listeners, your guest this week is an Emmy Award and Golden Globe winning Hollywood producer who has been named one of the 50 most powerful women in Hollywood by The Hollywood Reporter, a true Hollywood legend. That's a soundbite from Youngmi. And her career spans decades, where she served as an executive producer of the iconic The Joy Luck Club, and most recently as executive producer of the Oscar-nominated animated feature Over the Moon. Listeners, please give your ears to Janet Yang.
Am I supposed to say hi now? Hi!
Yay!
I'm embarrassed. I'm red from your introduction, but you can't see it anyway. Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to have this kind of really loose conversation. So few are.
Wow. I feel like I overdid it on the introduction, Youngmi.
I mean, everything you said was true. Everything I said was true. I feel like so. It's saying something when just like somebody just listing what you've done, is like just so like mind blowing. I feel like it says a lot about Janet, and I'm so excited that you joined us today.
Thank you. Great to be here. I want to see more of your cat. I would just want to warn you, my cat may also walk across, and our cats may end up bonding together on the screen. Oh. I don't know.
We love cat cameos. That's like I feel like that's the one plus of the pandemic and the Zoom meetings. Like I get to see like people's cats and dogs all the time.
And by the way, awesome. You said you had one question that was behind the paywall, and my answer has something to do with my cat, I think.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. Okay. But that's jumping right to the end. So we should. I was just teasing the audience a little bit.
No, we need that. We need more Patreon
Hollywood
subscribers.
I know.
Luring them in.
A little teaser. Anyway, I'm here to answer any of your questions. Just fire away. I have no secrets.
Wow. First and foremost, thank you for joining us on the podcast. And before we ask you how you're feeling, Youngmi, how are you feeling?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to say I just had something. I had a little phone convo thing with my friend right before the podcast. And it just like reminded me. And I was thinking a lot about, like I said, Janet being on the podcast today. And just, just things that I find probably are similar. I'm just assuming that we have some similar experiences just being, women and stuff like that. And I was just thinking about all those things. And my friend, I'm just going to try to keep it as vague as possible because my friend is very private. But there was like kind of a sad, she found out something sad about her very small child during a doctor's visit. And they had to do some sort of procedure to check and make sure that whatever was going on wasn't either, very serious or fine. And so she had to take him to this procedure today, which is obviously like one of the saddest experiences for humans, period. But she was telling me the story that she just started a new job and there's her coworker is like hits on her all the time, has a crush on her.
Oh, jeez.
And so
Ugh.
on Friday, and so she had to do this procedure thing today. And yesterday, she was like, she got the day off, obviously. And so yesterday, the guy that has a crush on her was like hitting on her and was just like, "Hey, what are you up to? Like, I saw you have like an extra day off. What are you gonna get?" And then so she was just like, "I'm gonna take my child in to get this procedure, and they're gonna see if this is like a devastating thing or not." And she said like the look on his face. But I just, when she told me that story, I was just like, that is obviously sad, but like just so funny. Like it just makes me like, just, you know, like this like doofusy guy that's like out of touch with stuff. And just like, I just was thinking sort of like, you know, the lives of women, it's just, that's just like, you never really hear stories like that, you know.
Well,
but like,
and motherhood is like a huge thing. Parenthood in general, but mothers in general, like we're so incredibly tied to our kids. It's like insane. It's visceral. It's like the umbilical cord never gets cut fully. It's hard. Yeah.
I definitely agree.
That's a whole other conversation. You should do a whole podcast about parenting and mothers. There was a study that came out recently that children actually decrease your level of happiness. I mean, it was pretty bold statement.
I saw that.
But they're like, I was like, what? What are they saying? I mean,
Janet, I saw that.
I'm like, wow. But what they're saying is like on a day-to-day basis is true. It adds a lot of stress to your life. Anyway.
Oh, wow.
I definitely saw that study.
Yeah.
Janet, and I no comment.
Yeah.
but I was just thinking, sorry.
Nobody I know would give that experience up, like once you've had it, you know.
Yeah.
Like no one I know would say, "Oh, I wish I didn't have kids," you know. But there are days, you know. Anyway.
Yeah, it's like that getting hit by the truck analogy, which is my favorite analogy for parenthood. It's like, you know, if life was a truck, would you rather get hit by it or watch it pass you by? It's like that's having a kid, you know. It's like, you want this thing that's going to destroy you, or you just want like nothing to do with it, not know what it's going to feel like.
It definitely builds character. It builds character, and it's nice to. And then you don't make yourself the center of the universe. I think basically you're a child until you become a parent. Because why wouldn't you just live for yourself until you become a parent? Then you live. Then somebody else's life is more important than yours.
And you just get to be very happy. Anyway, that was just something I was thinking about. Just how like it just seems that whenever something really tragic happens, there are like just such ridiculous like funny moments that always happen, and you're just like sad, but then you're like, this is actually kind of funny and stupid and weird too at the same time. Just
if it were seen in a movie, we would zoom in on the guy's face, like and there could be so many different reactions. Like if I were auditioning that scene, there are many, many, many different versions of what he would do, right? How he would react to that comment.
I really wish I could have seen his face though, in real life.
Yeah.
Awkward. Anyway, that's how I'm just feeling, just sort of like blown away by how ridiculous everything is. How about you, Brian? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling, so you've actually expressed this feeling before on our podcast, Hangwei, and I'm kind of going through it right now so this past week has been really exciting in terms of like getting opportunities and doing work that genuinely excites me, whether it's in the way of an audition or shooting something. And you mentioned before that when a lot of things like this are happening, you feel like the well is going to dry up around the corner. And because I'm experiencing a lot of hope and optimism in this current moment, I'm kind of trying to curb my expectations a little bit, because I'm like, all right, something bad is going to happen around the corner. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But bad things are happening. It's like the best of times, worst of times. Every day there's ecstasy and agony all rolled up into one. In my opinion, there is a lot of bad stuff happening, you know.
No, absolutely.
But then there's a lot of good stuff too.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this current moment, I'm kind of relishing the good stuff because, I'm really excited about what's to come ahead. And I'm also feeling like a child because I don't have a child. And yeah, based on what you said, Janet.
You should have just been like, I feel happy because I don't have a child.
Well,
It's
one
exact
always
energy I need to pull off
Yeah.
that scene where I'm hitting on my coworker and just
Oh yeah,
oblivious
you'll
to-
play. Oh yeah, we should audition you for that scene.
Brian
Oh,
would be
no.
perfect for that. Brian just like the clueless like himbo, like cool.
Cool. Your loss. But yeah, that is how I am feeling. All good things, all good things. But enough about us. Janet, how are you feeling?
Oh, there's a lot going on, and I was just hinting at it. Like it's the best of times, worst of times. There's so many things every day that I'm so grateful for and amazed by, and a lot of that has to do with our community and what's happening, and then there's just a lot of stuff to think about. That I can't help. I'm normally like incredibly optimistic, but I feel not so much these days about our country, about the state of the planet, about politics, about I'm scared of the algorithmic driven world that we're entering in some ways. So, and my mother's very old and she's on her last legs. There's just a lot of stuff. So on the external and internal, it's a lot to process. Like I'm really just going through life slowly and really trying to absorb everything. There are periods, I think the pandemic has definitely made us all more reflective, but I think it's a good thing that we're really becoming much more deliberate in everything we're doing and thinking. That's how I feel anyway. And that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing. Like there was a time where I felt like we were all driven by external forces and running around and whatever. And now, like, we're making choices, I think, much more carefully. Who we want to spend time with, what are we doing, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it's been like for me anyway. I can't speak for other people. But I generally think it's a very positive thing.
I think so.
Yeah,
I would agree with the sentiment. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the news cycle, perhaps this is a bit spoiled of me, but I do have to take breaks from it and just like
Oh
turn
yeah,
off
no,
my
that's
phone
like
and take a
survival.
break
That's not. You're not spoiling yourself. You're surviving. How much can we take? You can only take so much.
Right.
Yeah, I
Right.
feel like with all the current news and like the state of the world, I relate to you, Janet, in the way that I'll have moments where I'm just like, oh, this has changed me in this way where I am very like way more thoughtful in specific ways. And I'm like, oh, this is like really great because I don't think this would have happened without all this happening. But then other moments I'm like, we're all gonna die. It's like it's 80
Well, we always knew
degrees in
that.
this January.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We always knew we were going to die sooner or later. But it's like, how are we going to die?
We did know. You
Yeah.
are right. It's so it's like I feel like I just swing back and forth pretty violently. But overall, I do agree with you. I think it is a positive. Weirdly, right? Weirdly.
Well, I think in our own little worlds, this is how I feel like in our own pods, in our communities, in whatever we're doing, there's this feeling of really positive change. And then, but surrounded by the stratosphere of a lot of things that maybe are a little out of our control. Like I don't think the three of us on this call can solve climate change right now. And yes, it's just this kind of impending thing, it's almost like feels cliche to talk about it or just, So it's just a lot of stuff going on, and I, there are lessons, I suppose, in it all, but that's where we are.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we're all going to enjoy each other's company on a podcast.
Yes, we are. Let's.
It's the closest thing we can do to solving the impending climate crisis.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you're doing this. It's been, as I mentioned, I have listened and watched many of your episodes. It's been really fun. So I'm so glad you're doing it because It's like you're doing something. It's like I think the only cure for despair is to actually do something positive and that you enjoy. And so I'm so glad you are. I told you my Hapa niece recently, because we were just talking about what are you watching, what are you listening to, and she said, "Oh, I love this podcast, Feeling Asian." I'm like, I know that. If somebody her generation. No, it's so cool. When often if I'm talking with people of that age, I don't know how many generations we're on, but they're like, "Oh, have you heard this song by?" It's possible, like it's more than possible. I will never have heard of that group. So yeah,
Same.
whenever you can find that connection, it's good.
I'm like so blown away by like just that you've heard of us. That's just like blowing my mind right now. And it's making me feel really self-conscious now. I'm like,
don't feel self-conscious.
I feel
this is like
of
the
embarrassed.
opposite.
Stay on the pod.
I was like,
No.
I
hope
said
Janet
too
didn't-
much.
No, I mean, Young
What
Me,
did Janet hear
you
me
do.
say?
When you're playing more than one person and you're talking back and forth,
Yeah.
it's really funny. It's really funny.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
like
you.
you're, yeah, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing.
They all live in my head, Janet.
Oh
They're all
God!
in there.
Oh, what a lot of room in your head you make for them.
Well, that's like really great. We love hearing, we just love hearing from all our guests about how they feel. I think that it's like such a great way to open up the podcast. And I feel like it's such a great way to validate our feelings about everything. We did change to this like brand new format. But before we start with the questions about your emotions, we had a few questions.
Yeah.
I actually had a question about your career, which I found really, really fascinating because I was reading about you and I came across this tidbit that you were like integral in the introduction of Western, like I guess American films into China, and I just don't understand how that happened because, my understanding of your career is that you are a business person and you work in Hollywood, and that seems kind of like political to me. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
I can. You have a couple of days now. I'm joking.
I'll
tell you briefly. So my life was changed drastically in 1972, before you were born, because that's when China, which had been completely closed off to the rest of the world, and from where my parents came, they came over in the late 40s as graduate students, and then a new regime, the communist regime, took over, and they suddenly got cut off from all their relatives. And so I kind of grew up really knowing very little about their background. We had no relatives to speak of. I'd never met any of my grandparents, aunts, uncles. And in 1972, then President Nixon went to China with Henry Kissinger. And it was really a big deal because China seemed so remote and so frightening to most people at the time. But they came back and they encouraged Chinese Americans to visit their relatives. And that was like a really big move on the part of then Chairman Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, the premier, and our American leaders. And my mother, by the way, worked at the United Nations for many years. So she actually was a Chinese citizen, but China was not recognized as China. Taiwan was recognized as China by the UN and by the US. Anyway, so suddenly in 1972, I just started high school. Everybody can look up my age. And I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood on Long Island. There were no other Asians in the neighborhood. I was the only Asian in my school. And, it was one of those classic stories, just kind of fish out of water and feeling like I didn't belong. And I suddenly found myself in China. I didn't speak Chinese at the time, but I had like tons of relatives, like so many relatives. And they met us. We traveled together around China for 3 weeks, going from city to city to city. And the only way to get into China at the time is that you had to fly to Hong Kong. Then you literally took a train to the border, and then you walked across this rickety bridge, and then suddenly you're on the Chinese side. And you arrived there, and then you saw this long lines of military people, in uniform with arms. There's a lot, not the most inviting roll out the red carpet, but
Right.
once we entered there, then we got to the main city, Canton, where like probably 36 relatives had met us, and they proceeded to follow us from city to city as we traveled along and around and met with other relatives and sat in hotel rooms. And the place was on the one hand extremely unfamiliar, like it was obviously a much older country, a much poorer country, and a very, very, there was like military music blaring all the time. It was the middle of the Cultural Revolution, if that means anything. And so it was like so different from anything that I ever imagined. And
Right.
I remember my cousin was taking English lessons at the time. He's like, "Oh, will you help me with my English?" And so I opened up the book, and the first chapter said, "Down with American imperialist tigers or paper tigers," down with it. It was like, so things were very, very hostile politically, and they were just
Right.
starting to thaw. Anyway, but what was weird is that I came away with a feeling of connection to my relatives. Here were people that kind of looked like us, and I just started hearing stories that I never heard about what happened to my grandparents and this and that, and it just intrigued me so much. And I became really fascinated by my parents' lives, like how they lived before they were, because up until then I thought they were just boring suburban parents.
Right.
Took the train to work. We lived in the suburbs. They worked in the city. They came back. We had dinner every night. We had Chinese food, but they had such a regular life. Because back to parent and child, like when you're a parent, you want to have a stable life for your children.
Right.
They usually don't get to see your wilder sides.
Yeah, I love the
Right.
immigrant
Right.
the immigrant experience of like discovering that your mom was just like completely different life, like before she had.
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Completely different. Like I thought my father was so apolitical. I found out my father was like riding a bicycle across the country with his sister in the back to fight the Japanese who were invading
Wow.
China. I mean, like I
Wow.
got a wholly different portrait of him. So anyway, make a long story short, I just became fascinated by it, and I really wanted to learn Chinese. I was like, damn, I can barely talk to them. I mean, I understood a little bit. So later I went to college and I did Chinese studies, and I took a lot of classes in Chinese studies, and I just got so deep into it. I had no clue where it was going to lead. Even my parents, who wanted me to be Chinese when I was growing up, suddenly got worried because I was like so into
no,
China. They're like,
Not like that.
not that way. Not that way. No, you're supposed to just marry
much.
Chinese
That's
and
too
eat
much.
Chinese. Use chopsticks,
Yeah.
Use chopsticks and learn how to jiao ai and
Right.
whatever. I'm like, but then I was like getting deep. And my father even wrote me this long letter, like, why are you majoring in Chinese studies? Where is that going to leave you? I was like, oh, this is so
Right.
ironic. Anyway, I did, I went to Brown, but I also studied 2 years at Harvard because they had many more classes. And so I had a teacher at Harvard, a language teacher who was actually from China, and she was from Beijing. And I said, I want to go live in Beijing. Get me a job there. So she did. And it's shortly, I had worked in publishing briefly after college. And she said, okay, I found you a great opportunity. You're going to work at the place called the Foreign Languages Press, which is the official publishing arm of the government. You're going to be an editor and translator. So off I went in 1980 to do that. And I spent about 1.5 years there. And it was pretty much life-changing because what I saw there was many versions of Chinese that I never experienced here. I met a young writer, and then he introduced me to other writers, and then I met artists. There was the whole big art movement starting at the time called the Stars Art. And I saw films, I saw television shows with people that looked like us. I mean, they were, like, what?
Yeah.
I'd
Right.
never seen that
Wow.
before. I'd never, ever seen anything that was remotely creative. Like, here were actors and directors. I was like, and it just blew me away. And then I felt so stupid that I didn't think it was possible. But like, it opened up this door of possibilities for me. I was like, oh, we can do that, because I think I had that inclination, but it never
Right.
occurred to me that I could work in the movie business. So all I could, and just the way it transformed my own perception of who we are. Like I thought I was always fighting the nerd stereotype.
Yeah.
Because I never saw anything but that. And then when I saw these movies, some of them were really beautiful. I was like, oh, this will go very far in fighting that stereotype for other people too. Because if I felt it, God knows, who else
Right.
would have felt the same
Yeah.
thing. So that became my first mission. I was like, I'm going to bring these films out because that will change the way people perceive us. And I came
Wow.
back to, it was just like, that's all I could think about. I was like, I have to do something, I have to do
Right.
something. Like, people should see these movies. It's like amazing. So I came back. I ended up, I had to do something to fulfill my parents' dreams. And I also didn't know, like, this year and a half in Beijing would mean nothing job-wise. And I felt like I better do something to concretize it. So I went to business school. But while I was in business school, I started organizing these Chinese film festivals. I would walk to the Chinese consulate on 12th Avenue. I was in New York, and it was on 12th Avenue and 42nd Street. If you know New York, you know those avenues are pretty wide, pretty far apart.
Right.
And at the time, everything was in 35 millimeter prints. So there's these giant canisters, like be carrying these canisters and getting on the subway and taking them to some place or another. And but it really was so exciting for me. And then I found out about this company in San Francisco that had a theater. I promise to answer your question very soon, but it's really important to see all these.
No,
we're along for the ride.
So I found out there were a handful of other people that also were borrowing. That's what we did. We borrowed these films. They were borrowing Chinese films, and one of them was someone from a company in San Francisco, and they had a theater. And the theater was at 644 Broadway, and it was being refurbished, and it was owned by some Chinese Americans. And there were a few theaters in Chinatowns that showed mostly Hong Kong films, but they wanted to expand this to show mainland films. And I got to know them. And so when I graduated from college, that was my first real job. And that was the only job I could think of doing, and that I wanted to do, and that I was semi-qualified for, because I now have this little piece of paper that said MBA on it.
Right.
And so they could trust me. Otherwise, I might not have gotten that job, right? Some flaky person who just... So it looked like I was legit, which I still can barely balance my checkbook. But anyway, so I went to San Francisco, and we formed this company called World Entertainment, and I started flying back and forth to China to pick Chinese films to show at the theater. We created like this loose chain of movie theaters around North America. And I was happy as a pig in mud.
This is
No, but I love that job because we brought Chinese delegations over and Chinese filmmakers, and I got to go to China to pick films that I thought would play well. That theater, by the way, has become China. For those who are tuning in from San Francisco, it's now China Live, 644 Broadway. I remember very well, Broadway.
wow.
Because that was my first real job, and I was doing that in San Francisco, and we had a big theater opening for the refurbished theater, and there was an article about me in the San Francisco Chronicle. And San Francisco is a very small town in many ways. At least it used to be more so. So it was not hard to get a lot of publicity. I mean, I met, all the people I needed. I wanted to know in San Francisco very quickly, and there was a great Asian American community, and they gave us, and the Asian American community there is so much more evolved just because they've been there longer, more so than anything I experienced on the East Coast. So they really had a voice, and so there was a lot of interest in, this new venture of showing Chinese cinema. We got good press. But there was an article about me, which I still have, and the opening lines are, "I love China, I love film, and I want to bring these things together." So there was this executive at Universal Studios. At the time, it was owned by MCA, and he lived in San Francisco, but was starting to commute to Los Angeles, and he saw this article, and he just called me one day and said, "I'd like to meet you." I'm like, okay. And I didn't even know what MCA was at the time. I thought it was the phone company MCI.
Yeah.
And then he said, "We own Universal Studios." I'm like, okay. And he came to visit me, my little office. It was a basement office on Bush Street that I shared with Wayne Wang. And we joke about that because it was, we had like our desks were cinder blocks with like an old door on top of it. Anyway.
right.
And he said, "Well, I'm running a new division at Universal Studios, at MCA Universal, and I really believe the China market's going to open up, and would you consider moving to LA and helping me do that?" So he really had a lot of foresight. This is mid 80s, early 80s. And very few people, like most people, were scared of China and didn't want to have anything to do with it. So, but I was like, oh my God, that's like, I felt like, wow, working at a studio. So I came down to LA, and all these things I couldn't even imagine. Like, it was just out of the blue, right? Just a couple of years ago, I didn't even think I could work in movies at all. So suddenly I'm working at Universal, and I'm still flying back and forth to China. Now I'm bringing American film. I'm going through the whole Universal, Paramount, MGM, UA libraries, because they had a consortium for foreign sales. And we're picking and discussing films that would be appropriate for the China market. And there were very few that, like, we knew the newer films would be really hard sensibility-wise. Like, you wouldn't want to bring Back to the Future or Star Wars or whatever over, because the Chinese had not seen any American studio films since 1949. Like, nothing through the 50s and 60s and 70s. So we had to be very gentle, and also find films that would be appropriate, politically, culturally, in every way. So the first 4 films that we brought over, one was the newest film was, I think, from 1980, was Love Story, because we thought that was like a heartwarming story that anybody could relate to, right?
Yeah.
We brought over a film called Spartacus, because that politically, I don't know if you know, it's about an uprising.
Right. Yeah.
We brought in
My parents love that movie.
Yeah, no, it's a great movie. R.I.P. Sidney Poitier. We brought over a film called In the Heat of the Night, which also worked for them, and they all had to be approved. And the one that was like the most popular was Roman Holiday. And I got to take Gregory Peck over for a retrospective of his works. And so I was, so that kind of cemented a lot of things. Like, and these events that we had and the screenings that we had were not, we'd have special screenings, or the equivalent of premieres, and in China. In China, so that the best and brightest of the film industry would come. A lot of people remember that period, because it was like so. I'm sure it was just so their mind was blown. It's like to see
Do you think, do you think that Brian's parents saw Spartacus somehow through you introducing it to China, and it went to Korea?
To Korea? I don't know. What do you think? I don't know.
How did movies get into Korea back in the old days, right?
I mean,
I have no idea.
I'm sure you had some influence on that. This is all remarkable to me.
Blowing my mind.
It's possible. And it was so, like, these old men would come up to me like, oh my God, the last American film I saw was with Greta Garbo. And, it was like, and I guess both, like, the bringing Chinese films here and bringing American films over there really cemented in my mind, like, how powerful the moving picture is, and how it really changes perceptions. And I guess ever since that time, I've just been so utterly convinced that this is where it's worth putting one's energy. Like, if you want to change the world, you can do it through content. Like, especially, I have a special fondness for, I know TV is like big these days, but movies that, like, very whole, complete experience of sitting in a dark theater and, coming out with feeling changed. Like, I really saw that happen, and I've experienced it myself. So it's going to be hard for me to let go of that. It's pretty much propelled me, sorry, my iPod's AirPods almost falling out. But it's pretty much propelled me all these decades, like, that's really been my life mission, I think, for all this time. And
wow. I am, like, so blown away, because your career, you've just had so much foresight, and I feel like you're an example of someone who, you studied Chinese in undergrad, and you didn't really know where that was going to lead to, but
no idea,
right? Except, you're someone who is able to connect the dots, and looking back now, it makes so much sense. Like, these were all stepping stones to get you to where you are today. And I guess my one question was, you were an early adopter, you were a visionary, and you had the foresight to recognize that these content as a cultural commodity could be so impactful as a way to subvert stereotypes. And it goes in both directions, from America to China and vice versa. When when you established that film festival in San Francisco and brought over Chinese films, how was that received by American audiences?
It was the people that I met during that time were some of the people that went on to become the most influential people in film business. Jeff Gilmore, who later ran Sundance and Tribeca, he was running UCLA Film Archives. Okay, Tom Luddy, who started the Telluride Film Festival, was running Pacific Film Archives at Berkeley. Richard Pena was running the Chicago Art Institute. So I found all these wonderful people who were just very curious about new films, art films. And, I worked a lot through universities and museums, because it's not like they were going to make $1 million, dollars at your local theater. So, but there were always these not-for-profit organizations that really, enjoyed showing these films. And that made it super, and these people are people I grew up with, and in a sense, they started out often in the not-for-profit world, and they all went on to do amazing things. So that was, I met a lot of people at the time that became like it was so gratifying. Yeah, Tom Lardy worked for Francis Coppola, who's really interested in Chinese films. So it's like, everybody who is, especially earlier on in their careers, you don't know, like farm tribes, tribes are so important. Yep. Your peers, you just don't know. You don't know what's going to, but you do it because you have shared interests, and you never know. I teach now, and I worked with, for instance, the writers Larry Karaszewski, Scott Alexander, who've written a ton of things, including People vs. Larry Flint, and they met the first day of college at USC. And they said, let's try to write a screenplay. What the hell? And then, look at them.
That's
now.
Amazing. Jana, it sounds like you fell in with a group of people that are, obviously visionaries and smart, but they also just genuinely love the industry.
Cinema.
And it sounds like you fit right in with them, and like, look at all of you now. That makes a lot of sense to me.
It's like a shared love. A shared love of cinema and, storytelling, and, So oddly, sometimes Hollywood gets a bad rap because people think it's driven by money or glamour or fame. I'm like, okay,
I'm sure
if you're going in, it may happen.
But there are people that are truly in love with the medium, and
I think if you don't love it, you can't survive. Like, the money, the fame, the glamour may come. It comes to a fraction of the people. But if you're going in for that, forget it. Like, that is not the reason to go in, because it's far from guaranteed. But if you have, yes, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, sorry, were you done with your?
No, you have to cut me off because I'll just ramble on forever. So
I was gonna say, it sounds to me, what I think is so fascinating about that story, is, I don't know, when I read it, I thought it was like somebody gave you a job, and then you had to just do something that somebody told you to do. But now listening to it, I'm like, you just sort of did it because you were like, somebody needs to do this, so I'm gonna do it. And I feel kind of,
but I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I just
I would say, so you just went and you're just like, I'm gonna just do it. I'm like, how do you?
I guess, just naivete. I mean, I guess I've been kind of stubborn most of my life, and like, or just, I get fixated on something, and I'm like, I'm gonna. So it's a weird thing. I didn't think I had that even in my personality. I was kind of like, I'm the youngest of 3 children. And I was like, they saw me as being kind of the weird black sheep, lazy, flaky. I was the flaky one.
We're all films.
We're all the youngest, all 3 of us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Brian was talking about it right before we talked to you.
Oh, that's so funny. So there's something about being the youngest,
We're annoying.
Maybe there's less pressure. Yeah, we're annoying. But there's less pressure on us, And we're a little spoiled, maybe. I don't know.
That's exactly what I said.
I think we're a little spoiled. But then if we, get out of that mindset, maybe it's better. Maybe because we're not so quick to follow. My sister became a lawyer. She was a journalist. She was a lawyer. My brother's an engineer. They did all the right things.
Oh,
so
good.
there was a little less pressure.
I'm glad they did
it. Yeah, so my parents didn't have to suffer forever.
I want to shift gears a little bit, and Youngmi and I had this question for you, and is as evidenced from the early stages of your career, you've always been a champion for Asian voices, and we're wondering, what's it like to see younger generations now having the same sort of thoughts and discussions that you had when you were trying to bring Chinese films to America? Like, is it hopeful? Is it exhausting?
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing because, first of all, back in the day, after that whole experience, taking American films over, I think I'm just going to add this because it's how I got into producing. Then I was asked to help out on a movie that Steven Spielberg was directing called Empire of the Sun. And I could legitimately say that I could help him. Like, I didn't know anything about filmmaking per se. I watched a lot of films, but I could be helpful because I just spent several years flying back and forth to China, getting to know the film industry, getting to know filmmakers and the film officials and this and that. So that was an incredible experience. But and then after that, I was an executive at Universal for a couple of years, and then they started this company with Oliver Stone. But what I was going to say, and the first two films that I actually had my name on as a producer, first one was called South Central, and the second one was called Zebrahead. They both had African American themes. But what's weird is that there was no discussion. This is now the early 90s. There was no discussion of diversity and inclusion, words that we're using, DEI, this becomes such a common, all-pervasive theme in our lives and has affected every major organization, profit, not-for-profit. But back in the day, it was more just the raw experience that I had when I first saw Chinese films. It was the raw experience I had being on the set of Empire of the Sun and working with the fantastic Chinese production designer and the British crew and having Stephen gives, this one day we was it was raining and we were shooting the scene over and over again with crowds. We had 5,000 extras on certain days. Back then you needed actually 5,000 people. You couldn't paint it on a computer.
Oh my God.
And, and watching him, and I said, Stephen, they're really getting tired because I heard a lot of grumbling and I was like, they're starting to really complain a lot. And he's like, okay. And we gathered them in this church and he gave them a pep talk. And he said, "You're all my heroes," and I was translating for him. And I just, that kind of human connection, like here's a top world-class director, talking to a bunch of extras who probably came from a factory or from wherever they might have been from the police force. Like we had basically shut down the city of Shanghai. And just to see how, again, storytelling, how universal the language of film is, making, seeing how, at a certain level, we are the same. And and he was able to connect with those people. And so these experiences that I had were not intellectual or political. It was just like, oh my God, this is this country that was isolated for so long. We can, make it a hospitable place for an American director to work and hire 5,000 extras and bring in top talent from, America, England, and China and have people work together. And, it was like, it was not, it just was what was done and without too much labeling of what it all meant. Over time, I would say that it's really been in the last 5 or 10 years where the consciousness was like, oh, we need to do more of this. Right. But my original experience was not like I'm advancing a social cause. I was just so happy to have that experience. And I didn't know it was going to become a thing, I think I felt it more later when we were making Joy Luck Club. But it was just like, oh my God, these people. And that feeling has never gone away. In the periods where China and it could happen in Europe or in Latin America or anywhere, this feeling, because I have worked internationally too, it's like that feeling of people from different cultures being able to just meet on common ground
Yeah.
is so thrilling, you
So
know?
it's I feel like your story is, it kind of reminds me of, like, I think most people, even in this day and age, when you're younger and, you know, before you even know the language of like diversity and like and like representation, before you know all that language and you can intellectualize it, you have these emotions just living your life, and so I think a lot of Asian Americans would feel like it doesn't even occur to them most of the time that they're Asian Americans. They're just living their life, and they'll have these little moments of like, oh my God, these people in China and this American film director are all the same. And you have these like very like big epiphanies throughout your life. And I feel like, you know, like just going back to what Brian was touching on, I was just assuming that you would say sometimes maybe it's like, it is a little weird to see people in even Gen Z saying things like that. Like they're having to reintroduce these ideas like, hey, Asian people are people too. And it's just like, wow, like we're still on this topic.
Yeah, no, we're still battling because we've come a long way, but then we're constantly reminded that we still have so far to go. So there are times where I feel like, oh my God, are we talking too much about race and talking about cultural differences? But then like something will happen.
Yeah.
And like, you know, somebody will get pushed to his death, like a, you know, Chinese guy walking down the street. And you're like, oh my God. And you realize, and every now and then, I mean, we've all felt it, like that look that you sometimes get, or that comment, or the thing, right?
Of course.
So we're still getting it. So we can't like, you know, give up and say, oh, it's all better now. No, it's like the boo-boo is still there.
I was going to say, I love how you keep dropping these very big names very casually. You're like, you know, like Oliver Stone and a Joy Luck Club. Just it's so fast. You're just like telling your story, and I'm just like, oh my God. You know, Steven Spielberg.
Well, I guess for me it is
That's
kind
her,
of
that's
like
her tribe, Youngmi.
Well, it's not. I can't say he's part of my tribe, but it's just the fact. You know, it's just like that's what I got to do, and
that was my joke.
And you know, and I forgot. I thought you were going to comment when I said boo-boo. It's not a word I've used, because I said something about a boo-boo, and I thought you were going to comment on, make a joke about that.
No, I love that,
because I haven't used the word boo-boo in a long time, or if ever. That's what my mother might say to me if I fell. She's like, "Oh, you have a boo-boo? Okay."
I love that. Bring back boo-boo. Normalize boo-boo.
Right. But I feel like you put to words like such a complex emotion that, you know, even I grapple with to this day, where, you know, I do a podcast that has the word Asian in the title of it. And I think about, you know, from time to time, I'm like, am I talking about these things, like these labels, too much? Like, am I compartmentalizing it too much? And as you said, you know, you'll have these boo-boo moments, or these moments that remind you that no, like this is important work that we're doing, and you know, it's a pendulum that goes back and forth. But and you know, we touch on this a lot on the podcast, where there isn't a certain way to be an Asian, or a right way to feel a certain way about being Asian. But no, that I felt that very much so when what you just described. Yeah,
no, we all wish things were better. Where I think we all feel some pride that we've come, at least, I mean, I certainly do. I'm like, wow, we have come a long freaking way in some, you know, in some respects, you know. Finally, they have Asians in Vanity Fair magazine. I'm like, oh my God, like, you know. I was pretty stunned when they told us that, you know, Gold House would be featured there, because everything in that magazine is about European royalty, or whatever, super wealthy, you know, New York. I don't know. It just, but, you know, it's like when we see a lot of barriers being broken. Shang-Chi was about, Crazy Rich Asians was a barrier. I know Joy Luck Club was a barrier then, but like then everything becomes, So it's great to see, like, there's no excuse. Nobody growing up now should have the experience that I had, where I never saw anything. I think I was just mentioned the other day, because this was weirdly a pivotal moment when I was walking down the street. It was right before I went to China, right when I got back, anyways, the early 80s, and I was walking down the street with an Asian American male friend, and we were passing Barney's, and they had a mannequin that was Asian. a male Asian.
What?
And we literally were like screaming our heads off. We're like, can you believe that?
That was representation back then. They're like, we made it.
We was like, we made it. It's an Asian male mannequin. Oh my God. Sex symbol. You know, like this piece of plastic.
It's all we got back in the old days.
Oh man. I mean,
my
I
God,
think
that's
we have
amazing.
made a lot of progress though, because even the other, I've talked about this on this podcast, but now I'm gonna say it out here. I think we need fewer Asian men in Hollywood with 8-packs. Okay,
eight-packs?
I think
No,
think
you're
we
just
need
jealous.
We have
We're
saying
100%
enough.
jealousy.
We need more. No, there's so many cool. Okay, when I first moved to San Francisco, I went to a club that was primarily frequented by Asian Americans, and there was like an Asian American band playing. Hiroshima, a Japanese American band. I think it was called Hiroshima.
Oh my God, I know that
And-
band. My parents had
and-
the tape when I was a kid.
So, and I was in this club and I looked around. I'm like, oh my God, there's like all these cool young Asian Americans. I'd never seen that before. So that was the
Right.
beginning of my awakening of cool Asian Americans. And then I did have this boyfriend that went to Berkeley and he talked about all the cool things that went on. But I was like, oh my. So East Coast, West Coast is different, and there was it's definitely much more evolved group of Asian Americans. Like they were in politics, and they were, they really had a voice. I feel like in the Bay Area, and I think that this tribe in LA is like huge now. Like
Huge.
and people are really noticing from all over the world. I have friends that moved back from Hong Kong or China, like. Just to be part of the mix. When Gold House, when we were doing more salons before the pandemic, people would fly in from Asia or Canada or whatever,
Right.
Wow.
Like it was so exciting to have these gatherings, and there was like so many of them. And I was like,
Right.
where have you been all my life?
Cool Asians. Who knew?
This is
didn't
our
have- we
Youngmi.
didn't
This is
have-
our new goal for the podcast. Is we need to get in on these gold
Why-
house hangouts,
Yes.
because Bowen
Why-
was on our podcast and Bowen was
I
like,
know.
He
Bowen
said
was
that.
like
He
the
did say
true
that.
Illuminati is Gold House.
He-
These secret karaoke parties in LA.
I've been waiting for my
not so
invite. I've been waiting for my invite.
All right.
Mailbox
I am personally going to make sure. Well, first of all, have you noticed we've been pretty shut down, right? We haven't.
Right.
It's not like we've been having
Right.
parties galore. But as soon as I'll make sure that you are on the secret list.
Yes. Finally,
Wow.
Brian. Finally, we're in.
We can quit.
I
the
know this is
podcast.
the whole. Okay, I know this is the whole reason you wanted me on. You're like, we want to be on that list, and
We want to be. Yeah, we want to go to the
Okay. Mission
karaoke
accomplished.
parties.
Mission accomplished.
kidding.
Mission accomplished.
Okay,
No,
now-
of
wow.
course
Now
you
that
should be
we-
invited. I'm
Now that we
shocked
got what
you're
we
not.
want.
Yes. Okay, we can end this whole thing now. No, but it's also been a little weird because we didn't have like, it's been like friends and friends and friends. We didn't have, but of course you should be on. Of course. I'm shocked that you're not already. I can't, I'm not doing every invitation. But
Young, I think we should jump
Yeah.
into our
Yes.
our next set of questions for Janet here.
So excited. The first ever guest to go through the new format, Janet. And so we want to start off by asking you, what's something that you're loving right now?
okay, I'm loving a lot of things. I'm loving, you know what I'm loving? I'm loving reading a lot of books by especially Asian American female authors. Okay.
Yes.
I'll just say that. I'm loving that. Like when I read the Joy Club, that was a game changer for me because I'd never read anything that felt so close to my life. Now I get to explore so many parts of not just my life, but lives of many people, but things that are familiar. So I'm loving that. I'm loving as a good Chinese girl, I studied piano and then I quit, but then I took it and then I quit and then I put it in. I'm loving playing piano so much again.
Wow.
And I love listening to music. And like lately what I've been doing, I've been playing just like, even if it's classical or jazz or whatever, I'll put it on in the morning and this is, nobody knows this yet, but I've been like dancing, choreographing.
Wow.
I've I've taken a million yoga classes and Pilates classes and Tai Chi classes and and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, but so I'm always like, well, today I should do this or tomorrow. But like now I'm sort of combining different movements, and I started taking a dance class at this club, and I'm like doing my own. Okay, so that's something that no one knows. But
Wow.
yeah. So I'm loving that. It's like a great way to start the day. I start the day with usually meditation, and then I do like some whatever. And I'm also writing a lot. I'm working on a book. Maybe that's something I could ask your listeners, because like what would be interesting to read about. I feel like I've
Just
lived
everything
about
that
9
you've
lives.
ever said. Basically, anything that comes out of your mouth.
Just a memoir.
Yeah, just
Something
any
something
story
like
you
that.
have.
Yeah. There's a ton of stories. Oh my God, there's a ton of stories and so many interesting personalities. So I feel like I need life to stop for a
Yeah.
year, and then I can
Right.
take time. So I've been doing it in
I
drips
feel
and
like that all
drabs.
the time.
So that's a secret too. Not most people don't know that. So those are some of the things I'm loving.
It sounds like very
And-
self-care, the trifecta,
Yeah.
the self-care
Right.
trifecta, the dance,
Yeah.
the movement, the physical activity, the mental activity, and the
And
relaxation.
then give yourself a good cry. Read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara.
Yeah.
There
That's
we
the
go.
new one. That's the new one. Wow, she is. I've been reading all the reviews of her book, and I
Oh.
haven't yet read. Have you read the book? I haven't read
I
that
haven't read
one
the
yet.
new book yet, but
She's
A
incredible.
Little Life
but
was harrowing.
Torture Town. Torture
Oh,
Town.
so I don't know if I could get through that. I read about all the very tough scenes. But, from Kathy Park Hong to Lisa Ko to Qian Julie Wang to, there's so many. And then Gish Jen has a new book coming. Anyway, I'm really enjoying that. I feel like I may even have to start a book club or something.
That'd be great.
I'm really interested in particularly helping Asian women. I think we're very special. I mean, I think we're like special in a different, we're all snowflakes. No, we there's a specific experience, I think, for Asian women that's different. I was, before the pandemic, I used to organize mahjong evenings.
Oh wow.
And
Wow.
potluck. They became potluck mahjong. And that grew into something I started at Asia Society called Asian Women Empowered, AWE. And
wow.
yeah, so and we're going to do programs and mentorships and things like that, because I do feel like we get hired, we're somewhat visible, but we're never the top dog.
Yes,
We're never the authority. We're never the one running the show.
but I kind of feel like we're
Well,
always
you're
doing all the
running your
work.
show.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like when you see
we
a
kinda
big
work doubly
corporation,
hard.
yeah, there's always some really smart Asian women doing a lot of work, but not getting the
Yeah.
credit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So stuff like that,
That is-
So those are things I'm loving.
Youngmi,
What?
I think our new aspirational goal is just to have a modicum of Janet's like mover and shaker sort of ability, because
Yeah.
you just had a mahjong club and then it transformed into an Asian
Yeah,
Women
well,
in
it
Power
gave me
Summit.
the idea. It gave me the idea. Like we
Right.
would have so much fun. We'd be laughing, sometimes crying.
Yeah.
People sharing their
Yeah.
stories. Some of these stories
Yep.
were similar. Like
Right.
I do have a high level position at a studio or law firm or whatever, but I'm not really getting the credit. And,
Yes.
Blah 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 blah
I've
blah.
heard so many stories
And we're
like
like
that.
so many stories. So I felt like something needed to happen about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess
So-
on that note, I mean, the next question is, what is something that you're hating right now?
Okay, is this something something I'm hating? Oh my God, I got so annoyed today. I had to go somewhere and the parking spaces were so small and they were so narrow. And I'm like, how the hell am I supposed to get in and out without scratching my car or someone else's car? And I'm like, it was super annoying. Like, why do they have this? Oh, that's so cute.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Lauren
but
got so
on a
annoyed for
broader
you.
level,
She got
I
so
know
mad.
your dog
She's
is
like, "How
really
dare
annoyed.
you."
No, you know what I'm kind of hating? I'm hating the divisiveness. I'm hating I feel like things don't make sense anymore. Like I don't understand what's going on, and I don't like that feeling. Like I really don't understand why wearing masks has become a political issue. I don't understand it. I just
So
don't
lost.
know. There's no way I can understand that. Or,
don't know.
it's just like, what I hate is greed. Like, I hate the fact that 20 people are have $100 billion or whatever, and like there's more and more homeless on the street that, can't get by. I hate that so much, and I don't understand. I hate how these corporations are not being accountable, like one in particular, which is spreading all this disinformation and allowed a person whose name I will not say get into office, and and spreading more lies. It's just rampant, and I pretty much hate that, and I hate that we haven't done anything about our planet, and that we don't seem to be motivated enough to do the right things. I try in my own little way through recycling. I do composting, blah, 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 blah. In addition to, one other thing that I love is that I love I got a place in Ojai last year.
Oh, wow.
I love being there because I feel more human and whole. So I love that, but I hate so I feel like it's a little bubble because most people there are of a similar consciousness.
Right.
But I hate greed. I hate arrogance. I hate ignorance. Okay, those
and
are
you're
pretty
just in
big
Ojai,
things.
you open up your phone and you see a news story about Lufthansa running 30,000 empty jets just to stay afloat. And you're like,
what? I didn't read that.
Oh,
I didn't
oh
read
God,
that.
Brian, I'm enraged.
I didn't read that. Oh,
why do they have to do
my
things
God.
like? So
oh my God.
So many things. Just don't-
food
don't
getting
make any
thrown out the
sense.
waste. Yes.
Right.
One of the things about being Asian is that, okay, I save plastic bags. I save, the frugality that most Asians grew up with turns out to be, it's as opposed to being like a really weird, quirky, like what's wrong with these people thing.
Yeah.
It's like turned out to be a good, like now everybody kind of gets why we do this.
Yeah.
Right.
When I was like, when I was a kid. Oh, sorry.
No, please.
I was gonna say when I was a kid, my mom would like if somebody bought a bottle of soda, we would rinse it out and just use that bottle for water for probably a year.
Yeah.
And then I remember I went to my American friend's house, and I think this is like when I first moved out and I lived with like an American roommate, and she bought a $35 water bottle, which I get it. It keeps your water cold or something, but I was like, you can just use a Sprite bottle. And I kept being like, why don't you just use the Sprite bottle? But I feel
saved the little soy sauce packets.
Yeah.
If they're
I do that
not
too.
used, there's a lot of them. Then you don't have to buy some or something. Anyway,
I
so
do that too.
it's just
They're
like,
good for lunch boxes. I put in my son's lunch box.
Oh, that's so.
Right?
Oh, you have a child too.
Yeah, I do.
Uh-huh. How old's your son?
He's 7.
Ah.
Yeah, so I put them in his lunches.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
they really come in handy.
Meanwhile, I'm just
Brian's
very quiet
happy.
over here with my $35 water bottle.
Okay, well, as long as you're okay.
It's
She just
reusable.
shamed you.
It's
Youngmi just shamed you. She knew you had that water bottle, and she purposely gave that example to shame you. No,
Well,
I'm
Youngmi, a
joking.
Sprite
I have a
bottle.
water
is
But
bottle.
you're
double
using it
vacuum
again. Well, it's
sealed.
better than buying like a plastic bottle and throwing it and buying another plastic bottle. So
Exactly,
you're using
see?
it again and again.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
There you go. Yeah, see?
Thank you,
So,
Janet.
no problem. I'll
But the
be your
shade is
mediator.
deserved, Youngmi. But speaking of shade, I think this leads us to
Yeah.
our next question of our podcast. Listeners, this is a question that is going to be put in behind our Patreon paywall. So if you want to hear Janet's answer to this question, you're going to have to head over to our Patreon at
Better be good.
Gotta pay money.
patreon.com/feelingasian. You got to pay money for the good stuff.
Oh my
Janet,
God.
what
Better
is
be
something
good.
what is something wait, no, Janet, what are you ashamed of?
Hey.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
But Janet,
Okay.
thank you for sharing your story and being so forthright and open with us on the podcast thus far.
Not
but,
at all. Not at all.
Before we let you go, we like to leave all of our guests with this one last question, and that is, what is something that you're proud of?
My Asian accent? I'm not gonna. You can cut that out because that would be contradictory. I'm ashamed of it. I'm proud of it, or maybe it's just very human. You know what I'm proud of? My mother, on all these trips that I took to China, one thing that I was able to do in addition to work was I helped a lot of my relatives get out. And my very, very elderly mother now is being cared for by my cousin and her husband. And this cousin was orphaned at a very young age. And so, she became someone that we would want to help. And having a family member take care of my mother, someone that we really trust, has been such a blessing. My mother's now living in her house, and that would we've helped so many relatives get out. It was in part because I could go back and forth and actually talk them through the process, and
Right.
That makes me really proud. And my mother has lived a ridiculously long time. I think in part because she has the kind of care that you'd want your mother to have, and someone to cook Chinese food for her and speak Chinese to her, and et cetera, et cetera. So that makes me proud.
That's so touching that after living such an extraordinary life, you are referring to something that, is so personal and about your family, and you are mostly proud of how you have helped them. And I think that's extremely touching. And, I know that's, that is, a generalization that about Asians, but I feel like it's one that nobody really feels negatively about. I think that is a very lovely, generalization, and it makes me very proud, as an Asian as well.
Thank you.
Wow. I know. I was going to say the same thing. I do think that when it comes to caring for a parent, and this is just from my own opinion and observations, there's somewhat of a different dynamic and different expectation value set when it comes to Americans and more specifically East Asian culture. And I think it's a remarkable thing that you've been able to do in being able to aid and assist your family in this way through your passion and through your work. And it's incredibly it's aspirational. So I love that you shared that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck with your podcast. I'll be tuning in some more.
Thanks, Janet.
Thank you.
Before we let you go, where can our listeners find you and your work, or if there's any projects that you want to plug or you're excited about?
You know what? They can follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I don't tweet at all. I'm really bad at social media in general, but I do post things on Facebook and Instagram. Janet Yang 1, I think, is my Instagram handle or something. I think that's it. And I should not be difficult to find on Facebook, although I often max out on my friends. But then I have a personal and a public account, and then I also have a website, janetyang.com.
Lovely.
So I try to keep that updated as well.
And what about you, Youngmi?
Oh, social media is at YM Mayor, and my TikTok is Young Me Mayor. How about you, Brian?
You guys can follow me on socials at It's Brian Park, and check out our podcast on socials at Feeling Asian Podcast, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. YouTube.
Right
but in any case, everyone, thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Before we let you go, we wanted to do our Patreon shout-outs for this week.
Our beautiful Patreon subscribers who donated to our Patreon, which you can do at patreon.com/feelingasian. If you really like our podcast, you can give us a little money every month, starting at $3 a month, and you get cool stuff. The more you give, if you donate $10, you get to come to our Zoom happy hours, which are really fun. Once a month.
And but most importantly, if you want to learn, as you witnessed here with Janet Yang, if you want to learn a little bit more about our guests on a deeper level, we promise it's worth it. You'll get to learn the real juice, what they're ashamed of.
The juicier stuff. Yeah.
That's on our Patreon as well.
And an extra episode every week, basically.
Yeah. Well, Youngmi, are you ready to give our shout outs this week?
Yes, I'm ready.
First shout out goes out to James Guan.
James Guan is wearing a fucking suit right now. It's fucking 8 a.m. and he's wearing a suit somewhere. I swear to God.
And he looks
That's what I
damn
see.
good doing it.
What was that movie? Well, I know that, like, obviously Janet is the Joy Luck Club. Remember that scene where they're, like, the old days? They go back to, like, China. And it's, like, the business guy with the slick hair. That's, like, James, I feel like.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
James,
Hot.
thank you. Our next shout out goes out to Nicola Forbes. Nicola.
What do you think?
I'm getting cool teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the magic school bus teacher, but hot.
Miss
You know that there's like
Miss
some
Frizzle.
hot Miss Frizzle cosplay out there, right? There's a
Oh.
porn with Miss Frizzle. Damn, I'm into that.
Oh,
I just
100%.
unlocked something. I'm gonna look that up after this. Miss Frizzle cosplay porn.
Nicola, your existence inspires people to go seek out magic school bus porn. So
Weird porn.
feel proud. I hope you feel proud of yourself for that.
That's such a cool name. Do you think it's Nicola or Nicola? Nicola
maybe
is like
both.
isn't that Nicola?
I'm probably
Like,
mispronouncing
sorry.
it. I think it's
I
Nicola.
feel
Nicola is Nikola
Okay.
Tesla. I think it's with a K.
Yeah, but that's also, it could be like a male. I always feel bad because we never ask for pronouns here, and like so I don't know. Sorry.
Sorry.
Either way, hot. Nicola or Nicola, come on.
Next shout out
Sexy.
goes out to Youre Shaw.
Oh,
Legend.
Youe, our legend, a former guest of the podcast, extremely beautiful. Not that that's important. That's so sexist. I'm sorry. Women.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Like-
Youngmi, you say that. I was going to say that she is a very talented podcast producer and host of NPR Invisibilia. Go check that out.
But I sound like an Asian mom. Mostly she's very pretty. Sorry. I mean, you can't. That's just. I know that's just objectively true.
That was the
Extremely
most.
attractive.
That was the most Asian mom moment of you. My mom does this all the time, where you can. It could be something like sports, like an Olympic gold medalist. They are objectively the best at this singular sport in the world, and my mom would be like, "She has weird lips."
Yeah. It's like, but is she married? Is she married? My aunt said that once my cousin got into like the best school, like this really like fucking crazy science program in Korea.
Yeah.
But she came in and she was like, well, when's she going to get married though?
Oh my god.
That's me. Thanks, Youe.
Thank you, Youe. Our next shout out goes out to Jechun Heckman.
Jechun Heckman.
Jechun Heckman.
I always wonder when people have names like this, like how'd you get that? Oh, this is kind of like my name, Young Me Mayor. Maybe this
Yeah.
person's like biracial. And
Biracial.
they, or married to somebody. Or
Biracial, but
Yeah.
Asian father is what I'm going to guess.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But then but I was just thinking because the last name's Heckman.
Oh.
But I don't know. Maybe they took to mom's last name. People do that, you know?
Extremely progressive Asian father.
Down with the patriarchy. But then it's like, wait, you took the white person's last name? Wait, now it's problematic again. I don't even know.
Jechun Heckman. Mystery.
Mystery.
I'm going to guess that Jechun
but
Heckman
this
is a
person is-
CIA
yeah.
agent.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've never had one of those. CIA
And they're
agent.
out there. They're out there listening to Feeling Asian podcast while saving the world.
You think that they're CIA? I feel like CIA gets a bad rap now because like they're just like implanting weird capitalistic messages into pop songs and stuff. Like they're just keeping tabs on Feeling Asian.
I just the only image that's in my mind is James Bond, and I assume that's what all CIA agents do.
It's another person wearing a very sexy suit with
Sexy suit.
slicked back hair. I'm really into that right now. Okay.
And last shout out for this episode goes out to Carolyn.
Carolyn sounds just so loving and sweet. I'm getting this vibe.
I'm getting
Carolyn, just like a sweet.
extremely popular on TikTok.
Oh, right, living the dream for being sweet. Like maybe like those. I love those TikToks. They're so like comforting. Like somebody that's just really good at knitting, and it's just like, oh, that's a beautiful knit right there, like that, right?
Oh wow, this is what
Yeah.
I've gone into is this YouTube page where it's a guy who reassembles watches, and he has
That's
over
so
a million
fun. I love
subscribers,
that.
and it's so soothing.
So soothing.
Yeah.
We have to talk about, we should, yeah. Anyway, that was was that it?
That's it. Those are our shout outs for this
Those
week.
are our shout outs. Thank you so much for subscribing to our Patreon and giving us money.
Bye. Thank you.